Hi, welcome to Motivating Monday. Sorry I'm a little late today. I got involved in a conversation with someone, and I have everything here planned and looked at my clock and I misread it. So anyway, thank you for joining us today. My allergies are bothering me a little bit today, so you might see me doing this. And today's topic is motivation. And I find it really interesting that, sometimes as teachers, we teach what we need to learn, um, or that we need a reminder. So motivation is, hi, thank you all for joining us today, Maria and Robert and Greg. I really appreciate you being here. Today's topic is motivation, and I was sharing that sometimes we teach what we need reminders in our lives about motivation. And I had a really wonderful experience in March. I published and launched my book, and I launched it on a Wednesday and had a marketing plan, and I was highly motivated and intended to have it be a #1 bestseller. And by Friday, it hit the #1 bestseller mark and on Amazon for its category, and I was absolutely thrilled. And then I went, now what? And so my motivation was doing this, and when I accomplished the goal, it went like that. And so today I thought I was looking at some motivational, inspirational quotes, and then I looked at my favorite site for positive affirmations and came up with motivation positive affirmations. I went, okay, something's speaking to me that we need to have a conversation about motivation. And sometimes we think that motivation is this thing that just hits us from outside, and I'm inspired sometimes by things from outside, but motivation is intrinsic. It comes from within. So I did a little research, and I found a really good article by, gosh, let me look at the name because this is printed very small. James Clear. Clear, C-L-E-A-R, James Clear. Go to his website. You can find the whole talk, a whole bunch of information. And I find it really interesting that his last name is Clear, C-L-E-A-R. So we get clear on motivation. How cool is that? So anyway, it talks about scientists define motivation as your general willingness to do something. It's the set of psychological forces that compel you to take action. But at some point, the pain of not doing something becomes greater than the pain of doing it. And I find that sometimes with motivation, especially if we're stuck or we're not sure where to go next, that the pain of the stuckness, the space of I don't know where I'm going next, or whatever it is that we're going through that keeps us from where we want to go next, that pain becomes big enough or uncomfortable enough for us to want to make a change and be motivated to make a change. Sometimes we're very comfortable where we're at, and so we lack motivation. Sometimes we're bored, or we're not feeling good about what we're doing, so or we're not sure about where to go next, so it feels safer where we are, and we aren't motivated to move forward. Thank you, Maria. Thanks for joining us today, Carol. And so sometimes the pain of just staying stuck, whether it's lack of money, gaining weight, whatever the topic is, whatever it is we feel stuck at, that pain becomes greater than the change that we need to make, and it motivates us to the change. And sometimes we're really afraid of change. What's it going to look like? How much is it going to take? Am I going to be able to be successful? So those are all things that we talk about. Usually there's a mental threshold that it becomes more painful to not do what we need to do to move forward and feel motivated. And here's a common misconception about motivation. One of the most surprising things about motivation that it often comes after starting a new behavior, not before. We think that we're going to get motivated to do this. And yeah, that pain in the process, the pain of being where we are is greater than the change. When we get to that point where we make that decision, most of the motivation comes after we begin. And there's a momentum there that brings us and moves us along. It's called active inspiration, can be more powerful motivator. I remember when I started to write my book, when I got the aha of, oh, I can do it this way. I remember thinking, oh, I started writing my personal story, and it was like a timeline, and there were parts that I was even bored, and I was like, my readers are really going to be bored if I'm bored. And I got an aha moment, and I said, hi, Jill, thank you for joining us today. I got an aha moment, said, wait a minute, you don't have to do it that way. You can put lessons that you've learned, activities, we all learn from lessons, the lessons in our life, the challenges that show up. You can talk about these challenges, what you've learned, and then put some journal questions in there. It was like, oh, and I mean, as soon as I started with that, I got some inspiration from my blog posts that I had written. And as soon as I got on board with that and made that decision, because for a long time I was wallowing in the how do I do this? And I procrastinated because I wasn't sure, I didn't like it, I was bored with it, all of those things. But as soon as I discovered and I was open to what needed to happen, that motivation came from the actual working in the book and actually creating it. So it has to do with Newton's first law. Objects in motion tend to stay in motion. Once a task has begun, it's easier to continue moving it forward. These are universal laws. When we stop moving, that's when the motivation declines. And so it's really important to stay moving towards your goals. It's often easier to finish a task than it was to start it in the first place. I remember years ago coming up with the anticipation is far greater than participation, that phrase. And it was like, I remember thinking I had to clean the garage out. It was like, oh, so overwhelming to go clean that garage out. It was like, oh, it's so overwhelming to clean that garage. But here you go. I went out in the garage with my husband, and with 2 hours, it was done. It was like, oh my gosh, this didn't take anything near the amount of work or time that I thought it would. And sometimes those thoughts are what gets us into trouble when we have an anticipation about, writing a book. Oh my gosh, how overwhelming could that be? Who me? And then just start. And the just starting, it became easy and it flowed. And it's funny because in this really wonderful article, he talks about schedule your motivation. And I was like, oh. So, Robert, I'll have to do some tapping on scheduling because it's an issue for me. And I know exactly where it came from. As a teacher, and Maria, you're going to appreciate this too, because you were a science teacher across the hall from me when I taught home economics. And as a teacher, they schedule everything. You can't even go to the bathroom unless it's scheduled. Lunch was 20 minutes. I mean, we were given 30 minutes, but by the time you got the kids out of the hallway and you had to be in front of your door 5 minutes before the bell rang, and so by the time you got your lunch, you went to the bathroom, did the thing, you had maybe 15 minutes to eat. And it was like that all day long. And then when I came home, I had 3 kids at home who had softball, soccer, Girl Scouts, Boy Scouts, CCD, you name it, and it was all scheduled. And even the days they did their laundry and I did my laundry was scheduled. And so for me, as soon as I stopped teaching, it was like, I don't have to make a schedule, yay! And I've done that. And there are times where it gets me into a lot of trouble because I'm expecting inspiration to come and motivation to come from outside. And I know I have to schedule it. And it's not just scheduling things to do so much as creating a habit of routine and rituals. Some of the greatest people, famous creatives, have scheduled a ritual. For example, Maya Angelou rented a local hotel room and went there to write. She arrived at 6:30 a.m. and wrote until 2 p.m. and then went home to do some editing. She never slept at the hotel. Pulitzer Prize winner Michael Chabon writes 5 nights per week from 10 p.m. to 3 a.m. The author says that he starts his simple act of writing, he starts it with a glass of water. So create, first thing in the morning, create a ritual that becomes a habit, and the ritual guides us to the motivation. So it's really important to have a ritual and to have it become a habit. Hi, Anna. Thanks for joining us today. So in creating a schedule, you know, this whole schedule thing, again, Robert, I'm going to have to tap on it. It's more about creating a ritual, something that is a habit. You know, in the morning, get up, brush your teeth, we do our, you know, whatever. And when I was teaching, I had more of a ritual. I would get up and I would get myself ready and I would have breakfast. And there was a put makeup on it. There was always a ritual. A certain way I went and drove my car. Certain days of the week I got gas. So that was part of a ritual. And I know that today, because I have the freedom to create my own schedule, that I need to develop some routines, some rituals in my life so that the motivation is there. And again, sometimes we teach things that we need reminders in. I certainly don't profess to be perfect, and I'm always looking for ways to improve my life. And this is a piece that spoke to me today about having to motivate myself. And here's the thing, the key to any good ritual is that it removes the need to make a decision. It's automatic. And sometimes we need that. So we don't question, well, what do I do? How do I do it? When do I do it? Da, 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 da. And it gets that, I call it the itty bitty shitty committee going in the brain. We don't need to have that. If we have a ritual set up, it seems automatic and things flow. The most important part of any task is starting. If you can't get motivated in the beginning, you'll find that motivation comes after starting the task, and that's really important. How to stay motivated in the long run? One of the things that I found really, really interesting is when you're deciding that you're going to start a project or do something, motivation has a lot to do with the level of challenge that it has. Human beings love challenges, but only if they're within the optimal zone of difficulty, which means if they're too easy, we get bored, and if they're too hard, we give up. So the tasks need to be in alignment with, it's just difficult enough to spark our interest and to keep our interest, and to keep us going. Humans experience peak motivation when working on tasks that are right on the edge of their current abilities. Not too hard and not too easy, just right. I was speaking to my husband about a support group we've gone to for years, and it's easy. It's like I'm bored with it, and it's like I'm giving more than I'm receiving. So I needed to step back and find a place where there's mentors for me, people that I can look up to, people that can look up to me, but people I can look up to as well. So again, that's finding a place where we are challenged, and yet the challenge isn't so hard that we're going to give up. Science shows that when you're working on these kinds of tasks where the difficulty is optimal, but it's challenging, that not only we are motivated, but we find happiness in them. And so that's really, really important. And it's important to measure our success, because when we measure our success, we know that where we are, where we're going, and it also helps with motivation. I know when I was, a really good example of this is when I was marketing my book on Amazon and I could see the numbers going up and it wasn't quite there. I was motivated to put out some more emails, was motivated to contact some more people. I was motivated to do more things to get those numbers up. And so there was a measurement there. There was a number that I was looking at. Okay, I need to increase this. So what do I need to do to increase this? So that was very motivating for me. Our thoughts have a lot to do with it. And sometimes we can tell ourselves stories that are, I'm way too tired, this is too difficult, I call it the BMWs. Bitch, moan, and whine. And I got that from a wonderful lady, Birch Smith Lyons. I'm sure other people have heard it too. I can do that, or I can just look at, this is just as